If you'd asked me 3 months ago about my Grams, I would have I don't know, I would have smiled. I'd have told you about the smell of her house, you know? That specific, perfect scent of sugar cookies, old perfume, and the kind of clean that only grandmothers seem to know how to achieve. She was, in every sense of the word, my Grams, the safe place. The person who always had a $20 bill and a piece of advice, usually in that order. Grams, my mom's mom, was a rock. She'd outlived my grandpa by almost 2 decades, and she'd done it with this quiet, unshakable grace. She was a woman from another time, I guess. She believed in thank you notes, firm handshakes, and that there was no problem on earth that a hot cup of tea couldn't at least dent. Then she had the fall. It was a Tuesday, just a regular, boring Tuesday. She'd been reaching for a book on a high shelf. She was still a voracious reader, even at 81, and she'd missed. She broke her hip. It was one of those clean, sharp breaks that the doctor, a man who looked entirely too young to be giving this kind of news, called a significant event at her age. She survived the surgery, which was the first miracle. But something changed. The anesthesia, the trauma, the hospital. It was like it had shaken something loose in her mind. The woman we brought home was not the woman who had gone into the hospital. This is when we all learned the word, dementia. It started small. She'd call me by my dad's name. She'd ask where Grandpa was, and when we'd gently remind her he'd passed, she'd just nod and say, "Oh, that's right. Well, he'll be back for dinner." We'd just smile, these sad, tight smiles, and pat her hand. She couldn't live alone anymore. That was obvious. So my parents and I, we moved her in. We cleared out the guest room in our suburban 2-story, the one right next to mine, and we made it hers. We brought her favorite armchair, her quilts, her books. We wanted her to feel safe. We wanted to be her safe place for a change. The first week was just adjustment. Mom was stressed, trying to juggle work and being a caregiver. Dad was trying to be the stoic, supportive husband. And I was just sad. It was hard to see the woman who basically taught me how to read suddenly struggle to remember how to use the TV remote. The first weird thing happened about 2 weeks in. I was in my room, cramming for a midterm, when I heard her talking. I figured she was on the phone, but when I peeked out, her door was ajar, and she was just sitting in her chair, talking. I smiled, thinking she was just talking to herself. We all do it. But then I listened. "Oh, that's just silly," she was saying in that gentle, chiding way she had. A pause, then a quiet, breathy little laugh. "You always did have a sweet tooth." "No, I can't. Not now. They'll hear. My blood I don't know. It felt cold. It was so lucid. It was a conversation." I pushed the door open a little wider. "Grams? Who are you talking to?" She startled, her eyes wide. She looked flustered, like a kid caught with her hand in the cookie jar. "Oh, nobody, dear. Just an old friend. Just catching up." I glanced around the room. It was empty. An old friend? She nodded, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking up, at the ceiling. Specifically, at the small slatted vent in the corner of her room that led up to the attic. He was just checking in. It's been a long time. I felt a genuine physical shiver go right down my spine, but I chalked it up to the dementia. A new symptom. A confabulation. I think my mom's pamphlet called it. An imaginary friend. Harmless. A few days later, my mom found the first plate. She was changing Grams's sheets and found a half-eaten sandwich and an apple tucked under the mattress. "Mom, what's this?" My mom asked, holding it up. Grams just looked away, her lips a thin, stubborn line. "He gets hungry." "Who, Mom?" Who gets hungry? The friend, dear, Graham said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The friend in the attic. This is when the other things started. The noises. At first, it was just settling. Old houses make noise, right? But this was rhythmic. It WSN.T wind. It wasn't plumbing. It was a scratching. A slow, drag-scraped sound coming from directly above Graham's room. It's squirrels, Josh, my dad said, his voice firm, trying to convince himself as much as me. I'll call an exterminator tomorrow. The exterminator came. A big, beefy guy who looked like he'd wrestled bears. He was up in the attic for almost an hour. When he came down, his face was pale. So, what's the verdict? Dad asked, pulling out his checkbook. The guy just shook his head, packing up his gear. That's the thing, Mr. Harris. There's nothing. Nothing? Not a squirrel, not a rat, not a possum. No droppings, no nests, no entry points. That's one of the tightest, cleanest attics I've ever seen. It's weird. But the noise. I started. He just shrugged, and I saw him glance up at the attic pull down in the hallway. Houses make noises, kid. But whatever you're hearing, it ain't an animal. Not one I've ever seen. No charge. And he left. He practically ran to his truck. The scratching got worse. And it was always followed by Graham's. She started. Hoarding food. My mom would find slices of roast beef wrapped in napkins in her drawers. Half-empty glasses of milk on her windowsill. And the smell. A faint, spoiled, coppery smell started to drift down from the vent. Graham's, in the meantime, was changing. The fog of dementia was lifting. But what was underneath, it was something I didn't recognize. She wasn't just confused anymore. She was focused. And she was angry. He's furious. I heard her hiss one night. I was standing outside her door, my heart hammering. You can't just ignore him. He's not patient. He's never been patient. A new sound started. A soft, like something heavy being dropped. Thud. I couldn't sleep. My grades were tanking. I was living on coffee and fear. My parents were in denial, blaming it all on the house or the dementia. I knew it was something else. I had to see. I waited until 2 in the morning. I waited until I heard my dad's heavy snoring and my mom's quiet breathing. I waited until the scratching from the attic had finally, blessedly stopped. Graham's was asleep, her door open a crack. I slipped out of my room and walked to the hallway. The pull-down cord for the attic stairs dangled in the dim nightlight. My hand was shaking so badly, I could barely grab it. I pulled. The stairs unfolded with a groan. It sounded like a scream in the silence. I paused, listening. Nothing. Just the hum of the fridge downstairs. I crept up the steps, one at a time. The air got thicker, hotter. And that smell. God, it was so much stronger up here. It was the smell of a butcher shop left out in the sun. I pulled myself up into the blackness. My phone's flashlight was a weak, trembling beam. The attic was just an attic. Dusty boxes. Old Christmas decorations. My old tricycle. The exterminator was right. It was clean, no. Cobwebs, no dust bunnies. Just still. I walked toward the side of the house that was over Graham's room. The floorboards were cleaner here. The dust was swept away. In the center of this clear ground, there was a large, black, antique trunk. It was beautiful in a horrifying way, carved from dark wood with heavy brass fittings. And it was locked. A huge old-fashioned padlock. The sound came from inside the trunk. I should have run. I know that. I should have dropped my phone and scrambled down those stairs and never looked back. But I couldn't. It was something inside the trunk. I knelt, my entire body buzzing with terror. The trunk was warm, and that's when I saw it. Tucked next to the trunk, hidden in the shadows, was a small leather-bound book, a journal, and a small ornate silver box. My hand darted out. I grabbed the book and the box, and I ran. I scrambled down those stairs, shoved them back up into the ceiling, and locked myself in my room. I sat on my bed, my back against the wall, and I opened the box. Inside, on a bed of velvet, was an obsidian knife. It wasn't a knife, really. It was a shard, sharpened, with a handle wrapped in old leather. It was beautiful, and it was razor sharp. Then I opened the journal. The handwriting was perfect, the elegant, looping cursive of a bygone era. It was my grandmother's, but it was dated 1973. I started to read, and my world, it just fell apart. She was young, recently widowed. My mom was just a little girl, and she was sick, really sick. Polio. The doctors had given up. Grams. She hadn't. She'd found help. The journal described a group, the Seekers of the Veil. It described a ritual. It described an invitation. We called to the one who waits, she wrote. We offered a vessel, a place of safekeeping. It came. It is old and vast and hungry, but it is a giver of gifts. I flipped through the pages, my stomach churning. Helen's little girl is walking again. The doctors are calling it a miracle. I know what it was. The friend was pleased with the offering. The offering? I whispered. I kept reading. The pact is simple. It provides. It protects. In return, it must be fed. It must be sustained. The livestock from the farm next door will not be missed. I read for an hour. I read about my grandfather coming home from a war that should have killed him. I read about a rival's business suddenly, inexplicably, failing. Gift after gift after gift. And then I got to the entry about the boarder. I never knew she'd taken in a boarder. A man named Arthur Henderson. He rented her attic room. The attic. Mr. Henderson is nosy, she wrote, her handwriting a little more frantic. He asks too many questions. He has heard the friend. He thinks it is a trapped animal. He says he will call the Humane Society. He cannot. He will not. The next entry was 3 days later. It is done. The friend was ecstatic. The offering was substantial. It will be sated for a very, very long time. Mr. Henderson will not be missed. I dropped the book. My grandmother. My sweet cookie-baking Grams. She was a killer. She was a keeper. She hadn't just murdered this man. She'd fed him to the thing in the trunk. And now she was here, in my house. And her mind was going. She was forgetting to be careful, forgetting to be quiet. Or maybe the dementia wasn't just taking her. Maybe it was the price. Maybe, after 50 years, the pact was breaking. What happens if the pact is broken? I whispered, fumbling for the journal. I flipped to the very last page. There was only one sentence, written in a shaky old hand. It does not like to be ignored. If sustenance is not given, it will take. And that's when I heard it. A sound from the hallway. The creak of the attic stairs. I opened my door. The hallway was dark. The attic stairs were down. And my grandmother was standing at the bottom, her back to me. She was just looking up into the darkness. "Grams?" I said, my voice cracking. She turned. Slowly. It wasn't her. I mean, it was her body, her housecoat, her white hair. But her eyes were gone. They were just black. Two empty, shimmering voids. "He's so hungry, Joshua," she said. And the voice, it wasn't just her voice. It was a dozen voices. It was a man's voice, a woman's, a child's, all speaking at once. A chorus, the trunk is weakening, the chorus whispered from her mouth. "And you smell delicious." From the attic, a sound, a splintering of wood, the snap of a padlock, and a thud as something heavy and wet landed on the hallway floor above. "Grams," I whimpered. It smiled, a wide, wrong smile that stretched her face. "She's not here anymore, little boy. She's been the lock on the door for 50 years. And now, she's the key." She took a step toward me. From the attic, I heard a slithering, a huge, dragging, scraping sound. The smell hit me like a physical blow, a wave of rot and ammonia and ozone. I did the only thing I could. I ran. I screamed for my parents. I grabbed my mom by the arm, dragged her out of bed. My dad came out, rubbing his eyes just as that thing, the shadow of it, a mass of something too big, began to pour itself down from the attic opening. We ran. We didn't grab wallets or keys or shoes. We just ran out the front door, onto the lawn, into the night. We called 911 from a neighbor's house. The police, they didn't know what to do. They went in. 2 cops. They came out 3 minutes later, their faces ashen, calling for backup. And the fire department. The official story is spontaneous combustion, or faulty wiring. Something started a fire in the attic that consumed the entire house in less than 20 minutes. A fire, the chief said, that burned hotter than any chemical fire he'd ever seen. They found my grandmother. She was in the hallway. The coroner said she died of a massive heart attack. Said she'd been dead for at least 6 hours, before I even went up into the attic. But they didn't find a trunk. They didn't find an obsidian knife. They didn't find a Mr. Henderson. He lost everything. But we were alive. We live in an apartment now. My parents, they don't talk about that night. They're in therapy. They think the stress of it all made me crack. They think I imagined the journal. They think I imagined the voice. But I didn't, because I still have the journal. I don't know how. It was in my room. But when I was at the apartment, it was just there, in my backpack, along with the small silver box. I've read the whole thing now. All of it. I know what the pact entails. I know what it needs. And I know that whatever my grandmother kept in that trunk for 50 years, it's not in the trunk anymore. It's free. I hear it sometimes. Late at night, when the building is quiet. A faint scratching. A drag scrape sound. Not from the ceiling, though. It's coming from my closet. It's patient. It knows I have the book. It knows I know the rules. And it knows that sooner or later, I'm going to get very, very hungry for something. A new job, a nicer car, a safer life. And it's waiting for me to make an offering. I never really knew my grandfather. To me, he was just Grandpa Hank. He was more of a concept than a person, a ghost. He was the guy my mom argued with on the phone twice a year, on Christmas and her birthday. He was the reason she drank a little too much wine on Thanksgiving. He lived in some remote cabin, way up in the mountains of Washington State. A full-on, beard and flannel mountain man. My mom had left that life as soon as she turned 18 and never looked back. She was a city person, and by extension, so was I. So you can imagine my surprise when she asked me to go see him. "Alex," she said, wringing her hands one night in the kitchen. "He's not answering his satellite phone," which, you know, is pretty normal for him. But he's 73, and the big storm is coming in. A massive early season blizzard was bearing down on the entire Pacific Northwest. They were calling it a once-in-a-decade event. "He asked for help," she said, and that's what really got me. He actually called me, asked me to send that city boy of yours up to help him winterize the cabin, board the windows, stack the wood. He'd never asked for anything, not once. "I don't like it," Mom said. "But Alex, I can't go. And if he's alone up there." So I went. For my mom. I took a week off from my dead-end Dayton entry job, gassed up my rusting Honda Civic, and drove north. The drive itself should have been a warning. The highway turned into a 2-lane road. The 2-lane road turned into a gravel track. The gravel track turned into a muddy, leaf-strewn path that was barely wide enough for my car. My GPS died an hour before I even got close. My cell service vanished 2 hours before that. The isolation was physical. You could feel it. The trees were too tall. The woods were too quiet. The cabin was not really a cabin. It was a small fortress. It was built of thick, dark logs with a metal roof and small, high windows that looked more like gun slits. And he was there, standing on the porch, waiting. Grandpa Hank was a lot. He was 6'3", built like an old refrigerator, and had a beard that looked like it was home to several small, angry animals. He smelled of tobacco, pine, and something metallic. "So," he grunted, not smiling. "City boy, you made it." He didn't offer to help with my bags. He just watched me struggle with them up the steps. "Storm's coming in fast," he said, staring at the gray, heavy sky. "We got work. No time for city hands." The inside of the cabin was intense. Animal heads were everywhere. Deer, elk, a massive bear head over the fireplace. And guns, racks of them. It was dark, and it was hot from a roaring wood stove. The whole vibe was just off. Hank was jumpy. For a grizzled old mountain man, he was scared. He was constantly checking the windows. He carried his favorite rifle, a big lever-action, with him, from room to room. He'd set it on the table while he ate. He'd lean it against the wall while he used the bathroom. "What's with the gun, Grandpa?" I asked, trying to sound casual as we hauled firewood. He stopped, his eyes darting to the tree line. "Just being careful." "Careful of what? Bears?" He let out a short, harsh laugh. "Bears are honest. No, it's him." "Him?" Hank's face darkened. "Poacher. Thinks he can just take what's mine. Been tracking him, but he's smart." He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the ground. "He's been poaching on my land." That I could understand. A whole poachers. Sure, it explained the paranoia. We worked. We boarded up the main windows, leaving just a few for light. We checked the snares he'd set. Or, I thought they were snares. They were weird, made of wire and carved bones. "What are these?" I asked, holding one up. He snatched it from my hand. "Tools. Nothing for you to worry about." We were working near the edge of the property, and I saw them. Carved into the trees. Symbols. A kind of spiral with 3 lines cutting through it. It was on every tree, creating a perfect perimeter around the cabin. "What are these, Grandpa? Property markers?" Something like that, he snapped. Stop asking questions. Start working. Storm's gonna be here by nightfall. He was right. It hit not like a storm, but like an explosion. The wind didn't rise, it just arrived. A screaming solid wall of white. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an hour, and we were trapped. The two of us, in this dark, hot, animal-smelling box. The power went out, of course. We were on a generator, but Hank switched it off. Save the gas, he grunted. We were in the dark, lit only by the fireplace and a few kerosene lanterns. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. He was drinking heavily, some kind of clear, homemade something from a jar, and he was rambling. The woods, they give, he'd mutter, staring into the fire. They give if you give back. They demand a price, a sacrifice. Right, Grandpa? Sure. I was just trying to stay on his good side. I was on edge. He was on edge, and he was armed. You don't believe me, he growled, his eyes flashing in the firelight. City boy, you know nothing. You think this is all free? He waved his arm at the bare head, the pelts. The woods provided. They kept me safe. They talked to me. Okay, now we were in crazy territory. This was great. He was getting more and more agitated, staring at the door. He's out there, the poacher. I can smell him. He's waiting. Thinks the storm will cover him. Thinks I'm old. He finally passed out. He just slumped over in his big armchair, the rifle clutched in his lap. A heavy, rattling snore filling the room. I was wired. I couldn't sleep. The storm was screaming outside, and I was stuck in here with a drunk, paranoid, heavily armed old man. I had to do something, and I kept thinking about the shed. It was the one place he'd been completely clear about. A big, new-looking shed, 50 yards from the cabin. It had a brand new, heavy-duty padlock on it. What's in the shed, Grandpa? I'd asked earlier. Tannin supplies, he'd snapped, so fast it was a lie. Chemicals, nothing for you. His keys were on a hook by the door. His main key ring. I looked at him. He was out. The snoring was like a saw. Just a quick look. I told myself, maybe he's a meth cook. Maybe that's what's going on. Maybe that's what the poacher is. I quietly, so quietly, slipped the keys off the hook. I put on my coat, my boots. I grabbed a lantern. Opening the front door was a nightmare. The wind nearly tore it from my hand. The snow was already knee-deep, and it was blinding. I could barely see the shed. I fumbled with the keys. My fingers were numb. I tried 3 different keys before the padlock clicked open. The door was heavy. I pulled it open and slipped inside, closing it against the wind. It was silent in here, and it stank. Not just chemicals. I'd smelled the metallic tongue on him. It was blood, old blood. I raised the lantern. The shed was a workshop. Tools, tables, pelts, animal pelts, neatly stretched and tanned. A lot of them. And a wall of trophies. But they weren't antlers. My brain just couldn't process what I was seeing. It was a hiking boot. A single, tattered, high-end hiking boot nailed to the wall. Next to it, a driver's license. A young woman, smiling. Next to that, another, and another. A half-dozen of them. A high school class ring. A pair of broken glasses. A wallet, a child's bright red mitten, and a camera. An old Polaroid camera. On the table, there were photos spread out. Dozens of them. They were trail cam photos. But not. They were taken by someone. Photos of hikers, lost, scared, looking around. And in the background of every single photo, carved into a tree, was Grandpa Hank's symbol, the spiral. He wasn't hunting a poacher. He was the poacher. He wasn't hunting animals. My stomach just emptied, right there on the floor. I was heaving. He wasn't just killing them. He was curating them. Trophies, the rival, the poacher. It was me. He asked for help. My mom's voice. He asked for that city boy. It wasn't a call for help. It was an invitation. I stumbled back. I knocked over a can of something. It clattered, and the shed door, which I had closed, creaked open. A shadow filled the doorway, and the lantern light glinted off the barrel of the rifle. Shouldn't have gone in there, boy. Hank's voice was calm. It was sober. It was the calmest I'd heard him. He wasn't a drunk, paranoid old man. He was a predator. The paranoia was an act. Grandpa, I whimpered. Grandpa, I was just looking for the woods, he said, stepping into the shed, the lantern light catching his eyes, which were gleaming. They demand the price for all they give. He took a step. I took one back. I gave him strangers for 30 years, he whispered. They were happy, but they've been quiet. They're bored. They want something new, something different. He raised the rifle. Not at me. He just held it. They want family, he smiled, and his teeth looked sharp. They want a sacrifice. My blood. Your blood. You're insane, I stammered, my back hitting the wall of trophies. Unchosen, he bellowed. The calm was gone. It was pure rage. They've been waiting for you, city boy. My last hunt. He lunged. I didn't think. I reacted. I grabbed the first thing I could, a heavy iron fleshing knife from the table. I just threw it. It hit him in the shoulder, and he roared. I ran. I just bolted. I shoved past him, out the door, into the white. The blizzard was impossible. I couldn't see. I couldn't breathe. The wind was solid. I heard him scream behind me. A sound of pure fury. I just ran. I ran away from the cabin. Into the woods. I fell. The snow was up to my waist. I was lost. I was dead. I heard a crack, a gunshot. The bullet snapped right past my ear. He could see me. In the blizzard. You can't hide from me, boy. His voice was everywhere. The woods. They show me. I crawled. On my hands and knees. I found a hollow log. I forced myself inside. I buried myself in the snow. And I waited. I waited for hours. I heard him, searching. He was whistling. A cheerful, playful tune. Like this was a game to him. I heard him walk right past the log. I could smell the tobacco on his coat. Come on out, city boy. He sing-songed. It's time. I must have blacked out from the cold. When I woke up, it was silent. The storm was gone. Daylight, clear sky. I was still alive. I crawled out. My hands were frozen stiff. I turned back toward the cabin, and it wasn't there. No, not gone, but burned. A wreck, a blackened shell, like it had been destroyed years ago, decades ago. The shed was gone. The chimney was just a pile of stones. None of it made sense. I walked and walked for hours until I found the road, a muddy path in the snow. A snowplow driver found me. He stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. Kid, where did you come from? I told him. The cabin. My grandfather's cabin. He shook his head. Kid, there's no cabin up there. Not anymore. What are you talking about? You mean the old Hank place? He asked. That place burned down in '98. Took the old man and his grandson with it. Early storm. Just like this one. I just stared at him. I told the cops everything. My version. They said hypothermia made me imagine it, but I know what I saw. They flew a helicopter up there. They found the ruins, just like the snowplow driver said. But they found something else. In the cellar, under the stones, a wall, covered in keepsakes, boots, tags, licenses, a small mitten. They found burial spots all around the tree line. Dozens of them. They never found my grandpa. Not a trace. They think he escaped, that he used the old fire story as cover. But I know better. He wasn't my grandfather. My real grandpa Hank died in that fire in 1998 with his real grandson. So who, or what, did my mother send me to stay with what was following me in those woods? The cops asked me about the symbols, the spiral carved into the trees. I told them. One of the local officers, a tribal elder, turned pale. He said, "That's not a property mark." He said, "It's a warning. It means the land is hungry and awake." We bought a deal. That's how my husband, Ben, and I looked at it. A steal. We were fresh out of college, drowning in debt, and desperate to buy our first house. We were sick of landlords and rent hikes. We found this place, this 100-year-old farmhouse, 2 hours outside the city. It was perfect. It had good bones, as they say. It also had peeling paint, a leaky roof, and wiring from the 1940s, but it was ours. Or it mostly was. There was a condition, a catch. The realtor, a woman with a smile that was nailed on, explained it to us. "It's a life estate," she said, flipping through her papers. "The previous owner, Mr. Gable, is selling, but his mother, Meemaw Gable, has the right to remain in the home until she passes." We just sort of stared at her. She's in there?" I asked, pointing to the house. "Oh, yes," the realtor chirped. "She's 94, entirely nonverbal. Hasn't said a word in 20 years. She's no trouble at all." Mr. Gable, the son, was desperate to sell. He was moving to Arizona. He agreed to an insane price like half of market value. He also agreed to pay for a nurse, a stern woman named Pat, who would come twice a day to, handle Meemaw's needs. All we had to do was nothing. Just let her be. We walked into the house, and there she was. She was ancient, like a dried apple, a husk. She was tiny, shriveled, and dressed in a high-necked, old-fashioned lace dress. And she was sitting in this massive antique rocking chair, a huge dark mahogany thing right in the main living room. And she was staring, not at us, not at the TV. She was staring at a blank beige patch of wall. We said hello. Ben gave a little wave. Nothing. No blink. No twitch. She just sat. "She's very quiet," Ben said to the realtor. "See? No trouble at all. We bought the house. We were so stupid. We moved in. And it was weird. It was our house. We painted the kitchen. We set up our IKEA furniture. All while this person just sat in the living room, watching the wall. Nurse Pat was a piece of work. All business. She'd come in, grunt a hello, go into the living room, and do stuff we didn't watch. It felt disrespectful. She'd leave 8 hours later. "She has one rule," Pat told us on our first day. Her voice was like gravel. "One, you do not move her from that chair. Not for anything. You need to clean? You clean around her. You understand me?" We nodded. "Sure, no problem." And for the first month, it wasn't a problem. She was furniture. Creepy, breathing furniture. The first thing that happened was the rocking. I was home alone, unpacking the last of the kitchen boxes. Ben was at work. Pat had already left for the day. The house was dead silent. And then I heard it. A slow, rhythmic, steady rocking. I froze. I walked into the living room, and the chair was rocking, back and forth, vigorously, but she wasn't. Meemaw was perfectly still. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her head was straight. She wasn't moving, but the chair was. I must have made a noise, a gasp, and it just stopped, dead, in the middle of a creek. The silence was louder than the rocking had been. I just backed out of the room. I went outside. I sat on the porch until Ben came home. "Honey," he said, after I told him, his voice full of that rational tone I was starting to hate. "It's an old house, on old, uneven floorboards. It was probably just settling. It was rocking, Ben, hard." He didn't believe me. Then my little sister Maya came to stay for the weekend. Maya's 7. She's one of those spooky kids. Super smart, super quiet. She was fascinated by Meemaw. "Chloe, who's the statue?" she asked. "That's Meemaw, sweetie. She's very, very old. We just leave her alone." "Does she talk?" "No, honey. She doesn't talk." Later that afternoon, I was making lemonade. I couldn't find Maya. I panicked for a second, then I looked in the living room. My blood just froze. Maya was sitting on the floor, right at Meemaw's feet, cross-legged, just looking up at her. "Maya," I hissed. "What are you doing?" "I told you, leave her alone." Maya put a finger to her lips. Chloe, she's talking." A chill, like actual ice water, just dumped all over me. "What did you say, Maya?" Maya looked up at me, her eyes huge and perfectly serious. "Meemaw's talking. She's telling me stories." "Honey, Meemaw doesn't talk." "Yes, she does," Maya whispered, her eyes flicking back to the old woman. "She talks inside my head. She's telling me about the bad man. Get out of here. Now, Maya, go to your room." Maya just got up and patted Meemaw's knee. "Okay," she said, and she just skipped out. I looked at Meemaw, her face. I swear it was different. The skin around her mouth was tighter, like a smirk. I ran to the guest room. "Maya, what did she say?" "She said a bad man used to live here. She said he was mean. He yelled. A lot. And she made him stop." "How, Maya? How did she make him stop?" Maya just shrugged. "She put him in the quiet place, so he wouldn't yell anymore. I called my mom. I made her come get Maya that night. Ben was furious with me. He said I was overreacting, that I was scaring Maya, that she was making it up. Then the shadows started. I'd be watching TV, Ben right next to me, and in the corner of my eye, I'd see movement. A dark, hunched shape, drifting past the doorway to the kitchen. "Meemaw?" I'd jump up. I'd run to the living room, and nothing. She'd be right there, in her chair, motionless. "Chloe, you're exhausted," Ben would say. "You're stressing yourself out." But it happened again, and again. This was not a shadow. This was her. The one rule: don't move her from the chair. I had to know. One morning, Nurse Pat was cleaning. "This rug is disgusting," she muttered. "It needs to be shaken out." "Ben," she yelled, "come help me. We have to lift her." "I don't think that's a good idea," I said, my voice trembling. "Oh, for God's sake," Pat snapped. "It'll take 2 seconds." Ben looked at me. He rolled his eyes. "It's fine, Chloe." Ben grabbed under Meemaw's arms. Pat grabbed her legs. On three, Pat grunted. 1, 2, 3. They lifted. The instant her body left the cushion of the chair, Meemaw's eyes snapped open. They weren't eyes. They were milky, white orbs. And she opened her mouth. A sound came out. It wasn't a scream. It was a wail. A sound of pure rage and agony that shook the house. And every single light bulb in the house exploded. We were plunged into darkness. Ben screamed. He dropped her. She landed back in the chair with a thud, and the wailing stopped. Her eyes closed. Silence. We stood there in the dark, shaking, breathing in the smell of ozone and dust. Nurse Pat's voice was a choked whisper. We don't do that, ever. I knew. I had to know. The bad man, Maya had said. She's watching the wall, I thought. I went to the library, the town archives. I told Ben I was going shopping. I looked up the house. I found it. An old newspaper from 1953 on microfiche. The headline, Local Man Vanishes, Wife Baffled. The man was Silas Gable. He was a big, burly man, not smiling in the photo. He was known to police, the article said, for drunkenness and public brawls. And the wife, Meemaw, her name was Evelyn. Mrs. Evelyn Gable claims her husband packed a bag after an argument and left in the night, the article read. Police are skeptical, but have no leads. I scrolled down. And one last sentence. Friends of the family note a change in Mrs. Gable, who has reportedly refused to leave her living room since her husband's disappearance, sitting in her favorite rocking chair. As if standing guard, my blood went cold. As if standing guard, she's watching the wall. She put him in the quiet place. I raced home. I ran into the house. I grabbed Ben. Ben, I screamed, dragging him into the living room. What, Chloe? I pointed at Meemaw. I pointed at the wall. Ben, I gasped. He didn't leave her. What are you talking about? The bad man. Her husband. I yelled. He didn't leave. She's sitting on him? Ben's face drained of color. He looked at the chair. He looked at the wall. He looked at the floorboards under the chair. And, as if on cue, the power went out. A huge crack of thunder shook the house. A massive storm. We were plunged into blackness. Chloe, Ben whispered. Where's the flashlight? In the kitchen. I fumbled for my phone. I turned on the light. The beam hit the living room. It illuminated the chair. The chair was the MPTY. Ben, I whispered. Ben, where is she? She can't walk, Ben stammered, his voice hitching. She can't. Ben, I screamed. Where is my sister? Maya, she was sleeping over. The storm. We ran. Up the stairs. We burst into the guest room. The bed was empty. Maya, I shrieked. We heard a noise. From downstairs. A creak. A scraping sound. Like wood on wood. We ran down. I shined my phone into the living room. And there she was. Maya. She was standing next to the rocking chair. She was holding a crowbar from Ben's toolbox. And at her feet, the floorboards were pried up. A black hole in the floor. Maya, I cried. Maya, sweetie, what are you doing? She turned, slowly. He was. So loud, she whispered. But it wasn't Maya's voice. It was old, and dry, and crackling. Like dead leaves. He wouldn't stop screaming, Maya hissed. For 70 years. Just screaming and crying. Under the floor. A bad man, Oh, God, Ben choked. But it's okay now, the voice said from my sister's mouth. I finally let him out. He can be quiet now. And in the corner of the room, in the deepest shadows, a shape unfolded. It was her, Mimo. Her physical body was slumped in the chair, dead, eyes open. But this shadow thing, it stood up. It was tall and thin, and it smiled. He's quiet, Maya's body said. But now, the shadow hissed, its voice joining the other. You're being loud, and it lunged. I don't remember it all. I remember Ben tackling Maya, and she threw him across the room. A 7-year-old girl. I remember screaming. I grabbed the crowbar, and I swung it, not at Maya, at the shadow. It hit something, solid, and the shadow shrieked. The same wail from that day, and Maya just collapsed. The cops came. The storm passed. We told them everything. They looked in the hole. They found him, Silas, a skeleton in a rotted suit, a bullet hole in his skull. And Mimo, the coroner examined her. She's dead, he said. Yeah, we know, Ben said. No, the coroner said, shining a light in her eye. She's been dead for at least a week. Nurse Pat was arrested. The son, Mr. Gable, confessed. The life estate wasn't a deal. It was a curse. The family knew. They knew she had to stay in the chair. She wasn't just a woman. She was a prison, a guard, guarding her secret. We moved. We broke the lease. The bank foreclosed. I don't care. Maya doesn't remember any of it. She just remembers a bad dream. But I remember. I know what I saw. We live in a new apartment now. It's modern. It's clean. It doesn't have any history. But sometimes, when I'm up late, when Ben is asleep, when the whole building is silent, I'll hear it. A faint sound from the living room. A creak. She's not gone. She's just checking in, making sure we're not being loud out asterisk asterisk. And that's all for tonight. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones who might even live right next door. If these stories serve as a good reminder to trust your instincts and show your support and like and subscribe, hitting that bell means you'll get a warning before the next nightmare begins. Sleep well if you can.